This is Common Sense Generation. Common Sense Generation.
Hi everyone, my name is Maria Kądzielska-Koper and this is Common Sense Generation. When we look at Europe and the political spectrum in this continent, definitely what comes to our attention is again the growth of Le Pen family in France and this right-wing movement which goes in this country. What do you know about Le Pen? And not only Marie Le Pen, but also her father and what she proposes. This is all very interesting, and we have an expert with us, Kacper Kita, columnist and an author. Kacper, thank you very much for showing up here.
It's always a pleasure, Maria. Thanks for having me.
And you wrote a book about Le Pens, so you really know a lot about them. And as we mentioned, in our conversation is the fact that French culture is demanding. You have to, you have to at least speak a little bit of French to understand that. So right now, because of the political tensions and the elections, the eyes of the public opinion were on the family of Le Pen. But what do we actually know about them, and where Marie Le Pen comes from?
Yeah, obviously, it's interesting that the obvious fact about Marine Le Pen is that she's the daughter of her father, and and it's funny because today the name Le Pen is commonly associated with the daughter, but for most of history, Jean-Marie Le Pen was the Le Pen. And he was, and to a degree, I would say that he built a political family in the way that is rarely seen today, in the sense that he was a very controversial figure. He had a lot of controversies around him. A lot of people accused him of extremist views. We can dive into that. But the basic fact is that he was successful in creating a political movement that lasted for 40 years under his command, and now under his daughter, it's now over half a century. When we look at French history, the French nationalists often had the problem that the movements, either intellectual or political movements, they weren't that
lasting,
certainly.
Exactly.
They often didn't survive more than a few years. Well, we had Action Française, but it was more of an intellectual movement there, and less a political party per se. But it also never came to power, and finally was defeated and now is on the margins. But Jean-Marie Le Pen is also interesting for me as a biographer also, because he was born as a single son of a very simple family. His father was a fisherman. He was living in a small village. He was born in a smaller village at the French coast. In Bretagne, and they were simple people. His grandparents didn't know how to write, how to read. He was the first in his family that had a higher education. When he was a child, there was no electricity, no running water in his cottage, no floor.
So he's not an aristocrat.
No.
Paradoxically,
certainly.
Even though representing the right wing.
Oh yes. He grew rich during his life. And this is also something in which I think he was successful. He was very successful in fundraising, basically, and in raising money from politics also, and in running a political machine, also financially. And he always said that what makes it easy for him is his modest roots, that he always keeps, for example, the first little lamp that he got when he was young, that he keeps it in his now big house, and it reminds him where he came from. And basically, Le Pen, his first experience was the Second World War, when he lost his father. He was too small to participate in it, but he saw German occupation, and after the war, he went to study to Paris, and he basically engaged in the right-wing movement first as a student, and there was a lot of political stripes. There were the nationalists, there were the Gaullists, there were also a lot of collaborationists, people who participated in the Vichy regime and who believed that, Le Pen always, even though he wasn't personally involved in Vichy, he always argued, and this is one of the main controversies in his biography, that he always argued that Marshal Pétain was actually a hero who wanted to help to keep France survive during the war, and that people who engaged in Vichy France weren't traitors, but could be good French patriots. And after the war, his basic, I think, two views were anti-communism, because he was very anti-communist. And he believed that the communists want to take over France because they were very strong politically, also in universities, etc. And also he was basically a French imperialist. He wanted to preserve the French Empire, the colonies,
because the World War II is actually, we very often don't realize that, but it's the fall of the empires.
Yes.
And previously, this world was much bigger. The British world was much bigger, and the French world was much bigger. Then you had all of those overseas colonies where you can go, where you can work in, where your sources of money as well. And then the World War II changes it all, and you're back to the national state in Europe, which needed to be a huge change for a lot of people. And in the colonies as well.
Oh, certainly so. Le Pen, in his memories, he wrote that the tragedy of my life is that as I grew bigger, France grew smaller. And as he grew up, France lost grasp of more and more territories outside Europe. And he strongly believed, he was brought up this way, his dream job when he was a small boy was to become an officer of the French Navy. And he believed that in preserving, he also believed that the French didn't do that only for themselves, but also he believed that they were bringing civilization and prosperity to peoples in Asia and Africa. This is obviously an argument that was and is ongoing. But he very strongly believed that one, they're doing a good thing. Two, that France needs to have its empire to be relevant, to be a major power. And three, he believed that the fight against global communism is intertwined with this. So, and after he graduated from Sorbonne, where he became a lawyer, he didn't. And this is, I think, this magnificently shows us the eccentricity of his character. He didn't want to pursue a normal career. He decided that he wants to, after finishing becoming a lawyer after Sorbonne, you could do wonderful things. But he thought that it's a good idea to actually go to fight in Vietnam from his own initiative. He went to the army, and he wanted to go to Vietnam to fight for preservation of French Vietnam. And his bad luck was that only a few weeks after he finished many months of training, he went to Vietnam. But only after a few weeks, new government, a left-wing government of Pierre Mendès France, decided that this war makes no sense. The French won't be able to hold over Vietnam and then Le Pen was left bare-handed, basically.
So maybe that's why he survived. He might die in Vietnam.
Oh, this is funny that you mentioned that, because later on, when he became a deputy, he had with Pierre Mendès France, he had this argument, because he argued that Pierre Mendès France, you're a traitor. You left the French Indochine into China. You lost the empire. And Mendès France replied that if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't be here to argue that, because you would be dead. And this is an argument that was basically very vivid.
I would say the Le Pen seems very hard to put in any frameworks of any, let's say, a political sphere. Neither, because all of this eccentricism shows him like to be neither conservative nor liberal. He's very kind of his own in this way that represent, because some of those statements and actions are, we would say, very, right now from modern lines, very left-wing, and some of very right-wing, so, or even some of them even fascist, the other even like left-wing in this way that you want to fight for certain things. So he seems like a very eccentric man. He needs to be a character, really. But is my question is, so how did he came to power? What was the source of his success?
Basically, Le Pen his first big fight was for keeping the empire and Algeria. French Algeria was one of the biggest fights for him. He also, when he became a deputy, he actually then decided to go back to his former military unit to give a good example for all the younger boys of France to conscript. And he also fought in Algeria for a few months. He also beforehand he also participated in the Suez crisis as a parachuter.
So a brave man.
Well, yeah, one could put it that way. Others would say that he was certainly brave. Others would say that he was very aventurist.
Looking for a way to die.
Oh yes,
changing.
Yes. And here he is, 96-year-old, still living, despite all the things he did. And basically later on.
Maybe this is actually the way. The more risk you take, the more you gain out of it.
Oh yeah, and there were many instances where he could have died. The first, I think, the formative experience for Marine Le Pen, his daughter, was when she was 8. And there was an attempt at killing them, because there was a bomb planted next to their flat, where there was Jean-Marie, his wife, and their 3 daughters. And Marine always said that this was a formative experience for her, that she understood at this point that she is not a normal person, and her family is not normal, because they are people who want to kill them. And that their fight that they have is very serious.
It's formulated her as a political creature in a way.
Oh yes. At the same time, I think that you see them in this experience, but also in later experience when she often at school, at university, at work, she was always perceived as the daughter of Le Pen, as of a very, very controversial figure, and therefore she, at the same time, you have this trait of wanting to be accepted, wanted to become part of society, which you can see in her de-diabolization, this sense that you should remove this cordon, this wall between you and the rest of society. But at the same time, you have deep in her this adversity, this sense that we, as a family, also because it's not a simple political movement; it's a family and a political movement at the same time.
Aristocracy.
Yeah, sort of. Jean-Marie Le Pen is a bit like a half crazy, how to put it, chivalryman.
Yeah, chivalry. Very
A knight. Yeah, exactly. Who made up money, started up a political family, started up a political enterprise, and sort of built his own princeship. And then his children, at the same time, they have a better start in the sense that they have the notoriety, they have the money, they have a political operation, but at the same time they also have this this weight that they cannot, all three of his daughters, when they grew older, when they started being adults, they wanted to become more, to have a normal non-political life, but all of them later on returned and understood that it's not possible for them. And he was very controversial because he was basically one who argued. He was the political leader of arguing against immigration. He was sort of like Enoch Powell in Britain, but obviously Enoch Powell was more sort of a mainstream figure, and Le Pen came from outside the parliament, for example. But although he was a former MP, and gradually, as being a staunchly anti-communist, being anti-immigration, also anti, for example, abortion, more conservative, but at the same time, it's as you rightly said, he isn't easy to categorize because at the same time, for example, he started up as an imperialist, and in the 50s he would first argue that you can actually assimilate people from Algeria and make them Frenchmen. He only gradually became anti-immigration, and also for example, he first was a defender of Israel, then he became notorious for his he was notoriously accused of anti-Semitism, of Holocaust denial. So he was very contradictory in a lot of he did, but he was always, because of the fact that he was very charismatic, he built up a big movement of people who perceived him as as the leader against the system, against the elites, against the corrupt and the non-patriotic cosmopolitan elites.
What can we say about his daughter, so Marine Le Pen, which obviously is our interest because of her current actions and the fact that she doesn't give up of politics at all. She's in it, she's persistent, she is there, and again, she's hard to describe as a European conservative because everything about her, some part goes into the image or the box of conservatives, but then, for example, her pro-Russian position, which is obviously very hard to comprehend for everyone who's anti-communist, is like, where does it come from? Is it this love for imperialism? Or it just does the same tendency of being controversial as her father?
It was first Jean-Marie who had this U-turn after the fall of the Soviet Union. Before the fall of the Soviet Union, he was very, very anti-communist. He routinely, said about millions of victims of communism, about how we should fight for the enslaved nations of Eastern Europe, etc. But then, after 1991, he said that he declared that communism is now over, the Soviet Union is now over, and what endangers the French nation is globalism, and the source of globalism is the United States.
So it's anti-American.
Yes, he became anti-American, even though in the 70s he was pro-American. He, for example, then argued that France should go back into NATO structures after de Gaulle pulled them out. But this is a whole different story. So basically, Marine also inherited this perception that America is the source of liberalism, globalism, leftism, against national sovereignty, etc. They were all, for example, very critical of Iraq war, and as you said, it's difficult for her to describe her as conservative. It would be she's more of a populist nationalist than a conservative. She basically gave up upon cultural conservatism to a large degree because. As one of her biographers put it, her mind is a combination of Welbeck and Orwell, in the sense that Welbeck in the sense that we are a society that's basically, it's over in the sense that there are no, for example, stable families, there are no stable relationships, we are all particles, as elementary particles, as in Welbeck's.
France as an example of the fact that it was never the safe place for the safety of the family because everyone else always had all of those love affairs, including her father.
Oh yeah, it's true, and her mother also.
So
she didn't have a good,
role model of a perfect safe family.
No, certainly, and you see this in her own life and in the life of many people there, but. Marine Le Pen, I once, when I was once interviewed her, she said that, she believes that they have not had a successful family life, a successful career, and this they gave it up for the movement, for the political movement. So
that's very actually communistic approach, that you give up yourself for utopia, for some idea.
It's true. One should be able to balance, and it was always, I think, a problem with Jean-Marie that he couldn't balance. That, for example, he concentrated on politics, and for example, he spent little time with his children, his wife, and then it didn't turn out well, basically. Marine would say that he sometimes even for Christmas he wasn't around because he was doing some campaigning or stuff like that, and he was very, very devoted. But I think this is basically a problem for many people. Like it's easier to be conservative in theory than in practice.
Absolutely, to follow your own, let's say. The path which you're actually pointing out.
Exactly.
This is definitely difficult, especially when you are there in the public sphere.
Yes.
When it's so easy to say certain things and so hard to act accordingly. I think this is the major problem of the Catholic Church currently.
Oh yes, certainly so.
So many things declared, so little done. But coming back to Le Pen's. What Marine Le Pen stands for?
Marine Le Pen, basically, she would describe that she basically stands for nationalist sovereignty and the survival of the nation. So she would always put the nation in the center of her argument. And this is I would say, the Orwellian part, in the sense that she perceives danger. She perceives the threat of totalitarianism, the threat she would describe this, for example, as the threat of a combination of Islam and radical leftism that would take over our liberties. This is her basic narrative today. That this, what they call in French Islamo-gauchisme, Islamo-leftism, is what is the basic threat to our liberties. This is also a bit of her difference with her father, that she's very much that she would argue that she's the one that preserves, for example, the liberties, but also, for example, the right of a woman to have equality. And she herself, as someone who raised 3 children, and for most of the part she raised them as a single mother, she's this combination of having a career and having a family life, but not in optimal situation, certainly. And she basically stands for much less immigration, and strong affirmation of national identity and the sovereignty of a national state, for example, inside European Union, but also on an economic level. That she would be quite protectionist in terms of global. She would basically be against the global free free movement of people and goods, and she would argue that that the free movement of people and goods is actually something threatening to the community, threatening to the identity of all of them, of people in Europe, of people in Africa, people in the Middle East, that everyone should basically stay at their own place and cherish their identity, because if they are, just going around one place, another place, then they become, just ruthless tools of global capitalism. This would be basically her argument. And
again, so very hard to categorize anywhere.
Yeah, because it's also a fact that she has been, she had some evolution over the years. She sometimes she's more social, sometimes she's more open to business, sometimes she's more anti-American, sometimes she's more acceptable of good relations with America and Britain, for example. She's quite pragmatic also, but
so a populist on certain.
Yes, so she's certainly a populist, and she's certainly we have to always embrace the common folk, the common people, the working people, because she has the highest support among working class, laborers, people in smaller. For example, she would often argue for public services to be also available in smaller villages, smaller in the countryside, but also she would argue for less tax burden, for example, or for smaller French companies and taxing big international business, or for example less burden for car drivers. That people in smaller villages should be able to come to use their cars without higher fuel prices and stuff like that. And also she would always embrace this identity, this idea of a national state. For example, one of the interesting intellectually ideas proposed by her party is that apart from the Declaration of Human Rights, we should have a new Declaration of Rights of Nations. And every nation should have the right to have its own sovereign culture, sovereign political system, sovereign economy, and every nation, every community, every national community should have the right to preserve its identity and preserve its independence.
It seems like the echoes of Rousseau are
they are very
somewhere
present.
ringing the bells.
Oh, certainly so.
Kacper, thank you very much for bringing all of this.
It's always a pleasure.
It's a very, very interesting but also very complicated picture of the Le Pen family. And I do hope that for you, the viewers of Common Sense Generation, it was useful that we sort of have this picture of this new French aristocracy in politics, the Le Pens. Thank you for watching our show. And also I thank Polish National Foundation for making this video podcast possible.
This is Common Sense Generation.